presentation today and welcome Fantasy Bias and to get this process going. Thank you very much and welcome Fantasy.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. I'm like so honored and like low-key starstruck right now, but it's kind of cool because I can't really see y'all, so I don't feel as intimidated, but I know that y'all are there with me in spirit, and totally I feel the support, and I'm super excited today to be a panelist. My name is Fantasy. I use she, her pronouns. I'm 20 years old. I'm from Boise, Idaho, so I can see in the chat that some folks are from Boise, but I am going to school right now at the University of San Diego. Super exciting. I'm going to be majoring in sociology with a minor in social justice. So very interested and passionate about justice related work, whether that's disability justice, reproductive justice, racial justice, you name it, they all kind of interconnect. So it's very important to collaborate with those stories and experiences and identities. So I'm going to be sharing a little bit about myself today, and then also just talking about, the next generation of IL. And I will just say, though I am young, I do not represent the whole youth community, but I will share from my personal experience and maybe it will resonate with some folks out there. I will also say, the more questions we get, the more interaction we get, the more we're able to be honest, transparent, and authentic with you all. This group is very dynamic, and so it's super awesome to have so many perspectives. But yeah, I would just let y'all know to come up with those questions, whether that's based off of what we say or just what you're thinking about. I think there's not really limits here in what we can talk about exactly. We obviously want to focus on the next generation and the progression, but we're open to really incorporating and talking about a lot of things disability justice related. So with that being said, sorry, I'm just rambling, but I'm super excited. Last year was my first year at April, and it kind of happened as like a snowball effect. So I'll kind of disclose about my identity and myself, and then how I've gotten into different organizations or different movements, and then essentially how I came here to speak with you all as a keynote speaker. So I was diagnosed in 2012 with transverse myelitis, which is a physical disability. It left me paralyzed, and then eventually, I was able to kind of gain strength and muscle and balance back and feeling, but I guess my diagnosis doesn't really change the fact that I'm still passionate about disability justice, whether I'm progressing in air quotes or whether I'm, feeling better about myself. Or if I even, some people ask when are you gonna walk again? Or, would you ever want to become able-bodied again? And I put a lot of those in quotes because I don't really focus on that as progress. What I focus on as progress is the ways that I'm able to make community, and I'm able to fight for social justice and disability justice, and the ways I'm able to learn and know more about the systems that are at play in the United States and the systems that marginalize folks and privilege some folks. So I'm really interested in that rather than if I'm going to be able to walk again, right? And I kind of named that because I feel like from my experience, that's been the number one question of not what am I doing with my life, or how has it changed my perspective on my career, but more or less my physical appearance and how that is changing. So I don't really focus on that. I know that my disability has helped me get in collaboration with many people, many organizations, and I've definitely had a different perspective of the world and of social justice and justice related topics. But yeah, it's more about community. It's more about the people that I can find and the more that I can learn. So I just get so excited learning more about disability justice. And like I said, I was diagnosed 8 years ago. I grew up with a very open and welcoming family, single mother, 4 kids in Idaho. It's a rural place. So that's kind of how I got introduced to April as well. Just because of with being in a rural area comes maybe less resources or less exposure to opportunities and to organizations that are helpful. And just having a disability was really new for me, and it was really new for my family. But now it's my normal life. It is my normal life. I don't think of it as not normal or trying to fit in to be normal. I could see that happening when I was younger, but now it's more just like being my authentic self in spaces that may or may not have experienced someone like myself. So I grew up in Boise, Idaho, and I would go to physical therapy a lot. I was in outpatient physical therapy at one point. I was inpatient, but then like ever since then, I've been kind of outpatient. But fortunately, my physical therapist was the one that told me about this youth leadership forum, and it was in Idaho. And I don't know if y'all young folks have been to it, but mine was an absolutely amazing experience. I got to meet people like Jamie Davis, Mel, and just different people that really helped me and guided me in the movement and in being myself and in sharing my story. So that was a great experience. That was 2 summers ago. And then that kind of snowball effect helped me get into April. So I applied to be in April, and I went last year, and it was the first time, or maybe one of the first times out of 3 like times that I've ever don't do this.
Fantasy, are you still there? She's frozen up a little bit. All right, what we'll do, because this is technology, this is what we can all expect. Dustin, do you want to jump in at this point? And we'll circle back around. Oh.
Oh my gosh, I'm back. I saw the ASL interpreter was like froze. I was like, no. Okay, yeah, technology. So y'all can hear me? Is this good? Am I okay?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, sorry. Cool. Okay, yeah, here we go. So basically I think I was saying that so I did YLF, great experience. I see in the comments now that some folks have went, like I loved it. And then April was the first time that I saw folks that either looked like me or had similar stories or like looked nothing like me. And I was so excited to see and experience new folks with different identities and different experiences in the world. And I'd been to some conferences before, and they had never been like as diverse or as, I guess, open to disability justice as April was. So I just got super excited, so energized the whole time I was there. And that kind of helped me apply to the Youth Steering Committee for April. So since last year, I've been working with the Youth Steering Committee as vice chair, helping get the youth things, the youth events and opportunities going, but also fortunately able to speak to the whole community and the intergenerational community that we have here in the disabled community. So it was super awesome to be involved. That kind of helped me get into disability justice even more. I was just barely exposed the past couple of years. And so with that being said, I kind of share that story because 2 out of the 8 years that I was diagnosed, and that's even being aware of disability, right? Like before that, I was like totally ignorant and was never exposed to people with disabilities. And that could be just like the way I was socialized, the way I grew up. But having the identity definitely exposed me more so. But growing up, I didn't rely on SILs or like SILCs or like any type of disability resource, and not even rely, because, some folks have to, some folks don't have to, but they choose to, get resources from them. I just didn't know. I literally did not know those were available. I didn't know how to move forward. All I knew was my school and my 504 plan and my mom. And like, those were my main things of getting through life. And so then when I got into these opportunities like April and like YLF, it allowed me to be in connection with even more mentors and organizations that speak upon disability rights, and then also allow for, or like, as we're talking about the IL movement and improving, one thing is definitely to reach out to more young folks, to have programs for more young folks, whether that's interning or, the summer sessions or workshops, anything like that definitely help. And even if that's like here's how we work out like our able account, or how we work out like saving, because you can't save if you're on SSI and all these different types of stuff. I have to like experience it very harshly and ignorantly before I understand like the things that I guess affect me. So, you know, talking to Social Security and being like on the phone with like 25 different other people trying to tell me basically how to live my life. It's just really hard. So I'm glad that there's organizations and agencies like IL and like SILS and SILKS that are able to transition and help folks. But of course, we can all improve. We can all acknowledge the progress we've made with the 30th year anniversary of the ADA, as well as what can we do more, because a lot of the focus has been on rights. And literally, people with disabilities just got rights like couple decades ago, and that's not even a long time ago. I can't even imagine living without the ADA, but like there are still things today that I'm blessed to have the ADA to create that foundation and give me the right to go to school and have ramps and have paddles on doors. But like, what else are you doing to integrate communities, and especially marginalized communities? I'm a first generation college student. I'm a woman of color. I am low income, and just physical description, I'm a light-skinned woman of color with blue hair at the front and then black hair with a shirt that says Boise and it's really colorful. So anyways, just like incorporating marginalized communities, being inclusive, being equitable, improving on the way we see justice in the disabled community. And so I just think also the different agencies coming together, just kind of bridging the gap between disability awareness, disability resources. I have a disability services on my campus, but really it doesn't go past them when I need like so they work with, you know, like my getting to class, or, you know, my teachers and letting them know the accommodations that I need. But when it comes to like them not having elevators in certain buildings, or maybe not having accommodations for people who have non-physical disabilities, it's like, they're like, oh, well, we don't have the money to do any of that, and it's gonna take some time. So guess you just have to wait it out. Guess you have to go to a different class in a different building, or whatever it is. And I know you're probably thinking like, you're thinking lawsuits here, which of course that's always an option, but I think there are ways in which we don't have to deal with such an intense and somewhat unjust sometimes legal system to deal with our problems. Like, we should have organizations and community grassroots organizations that
We'll give it another second to see if she jumps on. All right. Sorry, this is part of being real, guys. Technology likes to freeze. Dustin, do you want to jump in at this point?
Yeah, this is Dustin. That's fine. And if Fantasy comes back, maybe she can come on like after me. So my name is Dustin Gibson. I'm wearing a red baseball cap, St. Louis symbol on it. I'm a light-skinned Black person with a beard. I have a sweatshirt on that says "All prisons are for profit." In the background, there's like a mirror with some artwork, a bookcase, and then also there's a sign that says "There are Black people in the future." I should probably state first that I come to this panel and also this work as somebody that is disabled myself, and feel very much a part of the independent living movement. Really is a home base to me, and how I was introduced to movement work as an adult. I worked at centers in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, three different centers. Some of my mentors I'm thinking about right now are people like Leah Gray, Milton Henderson. And also I seen Fantasy came back on. Did you want to finish up, Fantasy?
Sorry, yeah, I'll finish up.
No, that's fine. Go ahead.
I freeze up again. Thank you so much. I'm so sorry, y'all, but Thank you for bearing with me. I'm so nervous. Every time I see the interpreter freeze, I'm like, oh my gosh. Okay, so anyways, y'all, I think incorporating different agencies like universities and the SILs and community organizations and youth internships, whatever it is, really getting youth involved and letting them know that you're there for them and you're, you know, distributing the resources in equitable ways and you want to make things work and you want to be involved in these social justice movements that affect the communities, because we know that disability ranges across all different communities, gender, sex, sexual orientation, race, whatever it is. So I think just like the education is really important, not only on the disability awareness, but resources and disability justice. So I just want to say I'm also super open to the questions that are going to come in and just elaborating more on what I'm saying. I know it was kind of a lot more about me, but that's just kind of my experience in the lack of experience maybe, or the lack of resources that I grew up with. But now since I'm in college and I'm in another state, I have more opportunity to connect across states and across agencies and organizations to help me get to where I need to be, but also make that connection. Because youth are just as powerful as older folks, and learning from older folks is just as powerful for young people. So thank you all so much for having me here. I'm excited for the other speakers, and we'll be there for Q&A, so I can speak on more then. Thank you.
Okay, cool. This is Dustin. I'm glad that you got your internet back up and working, Fantasy. So I should say I come to the work as somebody that is rooted in the tradition of deinstitutionalization. The center I was at, we did a nursing home or nursing facility transitioning, and that's how I was introduced to it. That then expanded to other areas. I'm thinking about when I worked at the SIL in Pittsburgh. One of the things that happened is when Michael Brown was murdered in Ferguson, Missouri, which is situated right next to Kinloch, which is the first all-Black town in Missouri, incorporated, where my family is from. So it felt like something that was very close to home for me. And then also understanding that Kinloch is now a population of about 300 people, which was dwindled down from 10 to 15,000. So that was the one of the experiences that radicalized me, to understand how a Black community could be forcibly removed from the place where they've been at for generations, dispersed throughout a county, and then impoverished through other policies like redlining and whatnot, and then policed to the point where the city budgets were dependent upon putting Black bodies into cages. So I mixed that understanding with the understanding that people were profiting off of the amount of people that were in nursing facilities, that were in psych wards, that are in asylums and state hospitals, that are in prisons, in all sites of confinement. And then that kind of led me through a trajectory of re-examining the work that I was doing and seeing if it was actually dismantling the systems that we were up against, or it was complicit in uplifting them regardless of what my intentions were. What I've since landed at is I was very much complicit in some of those systems, whether it be doing nursing home transitioning, operating off of state contracts, and being reliant upon the state to somehow give us a freedom. And that came along with like a understanding that the people that are oppressing us is not going to liberate us. So then I began to look and try to build community outside of what was regulated by the state, what is being given to us through grants and through DOD funding, through DOJ funding, through DHS funding. And that led me to more justice-based movements. So I started off by saying, I feel like IL is my home. IL gave me a philosophy and a language that gave me foundation to be able to do any type of work. But at this point, it feels very difficult for me to think of IL as a movement, think of disability rights as a movement when I see so many people are excluded from it. And it doesn't speak to the language of justice that at least I was introduced to. I'm thinking about, like, as I was preparing for this panel, I'm thinking about like a decade of my life where I've worked 80 hours a week, where I've spent time organizing inside of communities, inside of prisons, inside of jails, inside of sites of confinement, and inside of neighborhoods. In that time, I've witnessed people 2 blocks from our Center for Independent Living be murdered by the police, and then going into movement spaces on a national scale and begging people to care about Black disabled people being murdered by the police, and engaging in arguments and discussions as if the police don't routinely murder people, right? So when I'm talking about exclusion, it's not just exclusion on not welcoming people into the space, but how we're literally viewing what is wrong in the world. Right now, like, we have an administration that we're up against that it feels like we really need to be real with ourselves about what we're facing and who we're facing. I view the administration that we currently have as a part of a lineage that has existed forever in the US. And I don't believe that's on party lines. I don't think that this is just a Republican thing. I think this is a Democratic thing as well. The US government has always been okay with disappearing disabled people in all forms of confinement, whether that is locking people up, whether it's putting people in nursing facilities because they're not willing to provide community care, or is they're literally killing people on the streets, right? We routinely see Black people be murdered, disabled people be murdered. We still have a Muslim ban in place. We have white supremacist violence that is just blatant and happens right in our face. We have hurricanes and fires where people are displaced routinely at this point. I'm thinking about Katrina, when people were left in institutions. People disappeared in nursing facilities in Idaho and Colorado. Thinking about the fires in Southwest Oregon or in South Oregon just a month ago, where one town of 3,000 people, where 75% of the houses that were burned were mobile homes, right? So we're talking about naturally progressing affordable housing for disabled people and poor people. And folks are there on the ground fundraising for $100,000 to stay at motels. Thinking about people being tortured in solitary confinement on a routine basis. Just the amount of young Black kids that I've seen in caskets over the past 6 years that I know of myself is too much. So I say all of that to say that the other side, the people that are not on the side of freedom, are cold and calculated. They are people that groom Supreme Court justices and identify them while they're in high school. They have think tanks with money. They are clear in what they want from the world. They are clear that they are okay with killing us, oppressing us. And it feels like as a movement, we also need to be clear in that and be real with what we have. The government is never going to grant us enough money to do the job that we need to do to actually be free, right? So what we have is people, and if we're not building inclusive movements that are sustainable, then we are never going to get free. This will only get worse, regardless of who is elected. Both candidates have been clear that they are okay with the continued oppression of Palestine, that they are okay with the continued oppression of Black people, trans folks, anybody that is not white and wealthy. So with that, like, I'm thinking about what that looks in the IL movement to hold all of these truths at once. And to me, it comes out as having a vision, having something to build. So the last few years of my life, I've been dedicated and committed to the work of abolition. So thinking about not only the destructions of prisons and rendering police obsolete, but thinking about what we need to build into the world in order for that thing to actually happen, right? So abolition to me is not this project of destruction, but it's more about creating what we actually need to live and survive. And along with that becomes like an imagination, like the ability to actually see something that does not exist, right? People have always done this. I'm thinking about like people specifically, like a Black disabled hero, Harriet Tubman, who worked to free people, to understand a world that they were never born into, one that didn't exist and one that they probably wouldn't see until they died. That's the type of visioning and imagination it feels like is necessary to build. So much of the messaging that I've gotten from disability rights movements broadly is about like where we came from and the past that we have and how we should celebrate that. I don't think one that's been a truthful story that's been told to me. And many other people, I think about independent living as a story that begins with people like Ed Roberts or Adolph Rapscott. Like, these are not the people that laid the framework for it, right? Those frameworks came from somewhere. I'm thinking about Black people in the US South organizing for hundreds of years and then transporting those same frameworks and ideologies and philosophies to other movements, namely the independent living movement, right? So we know that Black self-determination in the country has always been something that has been criminalized. It's something that has been marginalized, but it has also gave us a foundation to think about what self-determination looks for all groups of folks, including disabled people. So telling like a more accurate understanding of the history and what we've came from, I feel is very important for us to be able to see ourselves in a context and also think about what it looks like going forward. The ADA itself, although it's something that we should celebrate, it's also something that we should critique and we should look at, and we should incorporate an amount of rigor into our education as we do into the celebration of it. The ADA alone is not freeing anybody. Like Milton Henderson, one of my mentors in Pittsburgh, he was found dead last March, turned over in his wheelchair at the middle of the night. He was also in a neighborhood that was not accessible. There was complete disinvestment from it. There was complete redlining that transpired in the 60s and the 70s, and they built hockey stadiums on top of the neighborhood. People were displaced and removed from that community. Like, these are the actual realities that I'm thinking about when we're talking about what should movements address. I myself has claimed bodies of people that don't have family members, right? And that's while working at the SIL, and that's also not something that people who work at the SIL should do. So in thinking about like all of the shit, like quite frankly, that like we're up against, we need to have like a vision to combat that. And that vision to me looks like the building of something new. It's not just talking about the ADA as this thing that is somehow liberating people. And while that may be true in some situations where it is providing access, we also know it does ironic things like tell you a building is accessible and the bathroom is accessible, but has stairs going down to the bathroom. That framework, that legal-based framework of understanding our rights being given to us by the government and also defining what disability is to us is not going to get us to the point that we need to be at. A couple more points that I should make. And one of the ways that I think we do this is also being in solidarity with people that are operating and working within other movements. So I left IL. I mean, IL is still something that I come back to periodically, and there's community here, but I left the work of IL because it wasn't focused on justice in the things that are happening right now. So now I'm more interested in how do we build across movements, right? Like Fantasy mentioned reproductive justice movement. There are a lot of tensions that exist between these movements because of ableism, because of all of the other systems of oppression. I'm thinking about reproductive justice movement needing to be in conversation with people that are working against assisted suicide, and how we could form coalitions to build upon our understanding of what bodily autonomy looks like. Thinking also in I just had a conversation with Tom Olin the other day, and Tom talked about wanting to get rid of congregate settings and committing himself to getting people free, and understanding that everything that Tom is doing and people that have been doing for decades to get people free from these settings are the same things that people are doing to get people free from prisons. Now, when we see like all of that shit that's happening, and it's not a window that we're looking into. We're looking into a mirror, and like what that mirror usually reflects back is like something very monstrous. If we're a SIL and we're doing on the ground work, and we're not worried about concentration camps at the border, and we're not worried about people being put in prisons, and we're justifying it on the basis of criminality, we are literally playing into the same things that are oppressing disabled people all over the world, really. So I mentioned Palestine earlier. I'm thinking about Myanmar right now. I'm also thinking about places like the Congo and Brazil, places that have far right-wing dictators now rising to power in the same way they did in the US, because we have been scared to talk about the political ramifications of whatever the moment is. The messaging from the disability rights movement to me has always been just vote. And we don't care who you vote for. We just want you to participate. That messaging to me just tells me like you literally don't care if whoever gets into office will continue the oppression of our people. Like, no, we don't want people to just go vote if they're going to vote for Trump. We don't want people to just go vote just to be involved in that process. Like, we deserve more, and we should ask more of not only ourselves, but our movements. The type of education we need is not to bring young people in to tell them, one, the history that we have and how thankful they should be for it, although we should honor that. And then two, to tell them, this is what you get, right? You get legislation and you get to participate in a system that will continue to oppress you. We should invite young people into movements to see what they want out of the world and then support them in actually building that. So if people want, they don't want just jobs to have jobs, right? People want jobs to be able to survive and thrive and have all of the things that they need. So if that's not working for the majority of us, and the majority of us are poor and the majority of us are disenfranchised, then we have to reconstruct how we're actually doing employment rather than just saying we want to be included in how elite, white, wealthy people do employment. I think I'm gonna be over on time, so I'll stop there. Hopefully there's some questions and we can continue talking, but I wanna give Sarah enough time to.
Hello, April 2020. My name is Sarah Martinez. I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I am coming to you from my office in Iowa City, Iowa. And I just want to say I am honored to go after Dustin and want to give him a giant fist up. You know, to understand kind of moving this conversation forward, I want to kind of share my background and how to, you know, give context to what I'm going to be talking about today. So in March of 2019, I was a vocational rehabilitation counselor with the state of Iowa, working in 3 counties, two of which were very rural, 8 high schools, a caseload of roughly 200 people. And I, you know, was feeling like there were all of these issues stacked up against helping students and helping adults find employment. You know, in our rural areas, we were supposed to find jobs that just didn't exist. There weren't enough. There weren't transportation options. There wasn't enough capacity within our agency to give people the skills they need to be successful and to really thrive. And I was feeling like there were all these other issues that needed to be addressed before we really could find successful employment. And I found the executive director position here at Access to Independence open, which happened to be right across the parking lot from my office at Voc Rehab, which was funny, to say the least. But I was incredibly honored to be chosen and started in April 2019 to serve as director and to be able to bring my background and perspectives to independent living. And I learned that I am a rare unicorn coming from VR over to independent living. But, you know, there's power in collaboration and power in different perspectives. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from in the conversation today. And I want to start off by, you know, sharing my thoughts and empathy with leaders in independent living right now, because this has been the hardest professional year of my life. You know, the first year and a half in as a director, I never imagined that we would have a pandemic, that our community in Iowa would be hit with a land hurricane known as the derecho in August that, you know, just left incredible amounts of damage to our farm land and to homes, and displaced individuals, left people without power for weeks. You know, if you haven't checked in with new leaders in your network and you have the energy to do that, I urge you to check in with them, because we are not okay. You know, I have never worked more and slept less, because the need out there is just so incredible. And I can't settle with not trying every day to meet that need and address the issues that are out there. And I also want to share and commiserate with people that, you know, I've had a lot of doubts. You know, are the decisions that I'm making right? Am I keeping staff and our consumers safe? How do we continue to deliver services and meet these new needs that are arising? So I want to extend my thoughts to you all and hope that, you know, part of April this year is really coming together to, you know, lift each other up, and also, you know, understand how we can work as a larger network to really accomplish these bigger issues. So, you know, moving this conversation forward, how, as Centers for Independent Living, do we move this this movement forward? And I think that it comes down to being forward thinking versus reactionary. You know, how do we really set ourselves apart from other service providers? What are things that centers can do that no other provider or, you know, disability service can do? And I really think it comes down to our consumer-driven, independent living philosophy, and, you know, the way that we are structured, our services. We need to really remind ourselves of that and make sure that we are, you know, incorporating that every step of the way in what we do. And how we do that is cultivating leaders. We have to be, you know, training and providing advocacy, self-empowerment, you know, decision-making, assisting our consumers in becoming leaders at all levels, making sure that, you know, their voices are heard on committees, on boards, they are at the state level, they're at the federal level. We are putting representation of persons with disabilities in every issue, and making sure that there is no other choice but our voice being heard. And so we, as centers, can really create those opportunities and partner with others to do it as well. You know, I learned that locally, our UCED, our University Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities, you know, someone there was thinking the same thing, is that we need, you know, these training opportunities, and we need to be making sure that persons with disabilities are, you know, at every level locally, and then also within our state, so that we are forcing, you know, community integration. We can't be passive in this. We have to make sure that, you know, our consumers are sitting in those seats of power. And I think that is really how we continue to, you know, share the independent living philosophy and movement. Billy was saying yesterday in one of the sessions that staff are specialists. You know, where else can you go that someone, you know, focuses on Medicaid or focuses on Social Security? We have experts in all of these, you know, facets of services. Really, how do we hone in and become experts and share that with others of advocacy and consumer-driven services? I also want to think about the interconnectedness of the independent living movement and how to make sure that we aren't operating in silos. You know, I think about, you know, myself as a new leader, how to cultivate, you know, support systems, finding, you know, like-minded peers and finding other directors in the movement to share ideas and best practices and, brainstorming issues that I see in our community and how to address that. And this is so essential because there's so much knowledge out there. How do we prevent recreating the wheel when there are others out there who might have that knowledge and be able to share it? And I think, organizations like April and ILRU for creating opportunities to bring, staff together and, create opportunities for us to share ideas and those best practices. But we have to make sure that our new leaders can succeed and pass on that information they need to make sure that our culture and the service knowledge isn't lost when the next generation of leaders takes over. I see locally, federally, even within centers, our leadership is aging. And it is so important that we are, preparing the next set of leaders for when, the next younger generation needs to come in. And I really want to plug right now the peer-to-peer mentoring program through April, because that was something that I took advantage of when I first came on board. And I have to thank Scott Burlingame, who was assigned as my mentor, because it was so incredibly helpful as an outsider, essentially of the movement, of having someone to really help me understand how I can jump in and be useful, how to, really move my agency and center forward. I use agency and center kind of interchangeably. But how I can take these ideas that I have and issues that I see from an outsider perspective and really make sure that I am moving in independent living. I am moving those ideas forward in the way they should be. And so, if you are a leader right now in your community, you're a director who has useful information to share, please consider, sharing that knowledge, getting into opportunities like the peer-to-peer mentoring to be able to give back and help, new leaders like me really, move our centers forward and be successful. So, we're talking about breaking down silos of knowledge within the movement, but also within our communities. How do we break down the silos within disability services and providers and state organizations and spread our philosophy and information to them to make sure that their consumers are driving their services and how, they can best honor that decision making. I think back to my time with VR, and I want to be vulnerable with you because, when I was a counselor, I learned from other counselors and just kind of from being in that job that when we talked about youth transition, it wasn't about how to support someone being independent in the community. It was what supports they needed in place, what supports we needed to talk about, which included guardianship. And we didn't have a full conversation about what options there were. We talked to the families and to students about, how to obtain guardianship. And I am thankful that I have a different perspective now on guardianship, and I can share that with others and inform, families that there are so many other services and supports for students to be independent. But if we don't, help others and, understand where people are coming from and show kindness to changing those perspectives, because I'm thankful people were kind to me in helping me understand what I needed to know. How do we really change the conversation? So it does take, bringing organizations together, bringing, our philosophy to others to really, make sure that as a community, we are addressing the bigger issues at hand. And it's much more than just, you know, services to our consumers. It is services to everyone to make, you know, our communities more integrated, livable places. So, you know, I thank you for letting me be vulnerable with you today. And I'm thankful for where I am today, and also realize that I have so much more to grow. And I you know, if that's anything, the humbleness of it all, the next 30 years of the ADA, I kind of think about those things is where we have succeeded, but also where we have to grow. And I hope that the issues that you're seeing in your communities, you think about how to be forward thinking with them. So I just rambled the last couple of minutes. And I'm going to turn it over to our panelists, and thank you so much for allowing me to be here today.
All right, wonderful. Thank you all three. So much good information there. So we did have some questions come in. We're going to start off, I think we're going to kind of hand this one off to you, Fantasy, to start with, but what specific activities, programs, or events can CILS offer to empower youth to gather, to participate, to strengthen, to support our network, and to build systemic advocacy skills?
Thank you so much. Yes, I saw this question. I saw youth, and I was like, okay, here I go. I'm gonna name something. But thank you for this question. I know that we don't have a lot of time, so I kind of just looked at the schedule, and there's some conferences that are coming up, such as the one tonight, or not tonight. It's actually in at 1:30 Pacific, and then 4:30 Eastern, but it's the youth conference, but it's disability and intersectionality. So we're gonna be talking a lot about how to speak upon our experiences, self-advocacy, but also how to incorporate these systems, these movements, how to, like I was saying before, incorporate marginalized identities, targeted identities, and talking about movements that are very prevalent today, such as Black Lives Matter, talking about police brutality against disabled and Black disabled folks, talking about the reproductive movement in healthcare and voting. So I think having either conversations or conferences or workshops from these centers or organizations will definitely help youth get involved. It will help conversations continue, because the more that they're suppressed or shut down or deemed too political for certain folks, the less we're going to be able to acknowledge unique identities and experiences and the hidden problems that I guess accumulate in the systems if we don't address them. So youth are able to kind of see the evolving changes in the traditional agencies, such as independent living and just different organizations that have been around for a while. And like Dustin was saying, acknowledging and celebrating the ADA, but also thinking beyond and thinking how it may or may not serve certain communities, or who's exempt from the ADA. You know, we have nonprofits or different agencies and different centers and organizations that are either exempt or can get around and can go through loopholes, not really catering to even the rights. But once we acknowledge the rights and we, address the ADA and celebrate it, the more we can acknowledge how to move forward and how to incorporate people of different identities. So not only incorporating youth, but incorporating low-income youth, rural youth, non-binary youth, whatever that is, across different identities, but with the intersection of having a disability. So I was just wanting to plug the youth conferences that are happening, Disability and Intersectionality today, and then also tomorrow, there's a youth conference, Let's Talk IL. So Let's Talk Independent Living, and this is being facilitated by Mel's, who is a great advocate and just a great person, really, in general, around disability and intersectionality and how to move forward, acknowledge the privileges and the challenges that folks experience, and just moving forward to a more grassroots, community level connection. So don't want to take too much time rambling, but those conferences are going to be really amazing. You'll not only hear from myself, but other youth as well in the conference. Like I said, I don't speak for all youth, but it definitely involves us. And it's just the more that we dismantle these structures and ideas and traditional thought, the more we get in tune with the authentic experiences that folks are having to live through today in a very violent and scary time. But then, you know, encompassing love and compassion and community to cultivate those better communities. Hopefully that answered your question, but thank you
Yes.
for that.
Thanks, Fancy. I really think too that it's so important. What you said is, as you watch these things, steal, borrow, and copy everything. Listen, see what other people are doing, and do your best to take that back to your individual communities. Next, we're going to go to Dustin with a question. And the question is, are we supposed to live in a country without law? Prisons or jails are a place that help keep us from a world of total lawlessness or anarchy. I guess I just need some clarification. So Dustin, it's up to you.
Cool, thank you. This is Dustin. Well, I would probably challenge that notion that prisons and jails keep us safe. What it feels like that does on the face value is erase the people that are actually in prisons and jails who are not safe. And as Angela Davis says, prisons don't disappear social problems, they disappear people. So what we'll find is we're warehousing people in prisons and jails, namely disabled people who represent the majority of the population. And we don't address the things that actually create any type of harm in community. Prisons and jails don't do anything to insert accountability into our communities at all. And I guess prisons themselves are also a site of sensory deprivation in general, deprivation of language, deprivation of connection, of human touch, of desire, of a lot of different things. So when I think about what creates and exacerbates disability, it's also important to note that those are the same things that create barriers for disabled people. And prisons are one of those things that do that. And I think that as a society that we deserve more than dealing with our problems by outsourcing them. So yeah, that's all I'll say on that.
All right, I am back on again. And so I think we're going to have to go a little rapid fire here. We have a few different questions coming in, so we'll start back with Fantasy on the next question. We often talk about how IL leadership is aging and breaking down the silos as youth move through the system and carve niches in independent living. Are we being shown this movement for the first time of how we bury any negative feelings associated with systematic oppression and racism?
Yeah, thank you. I will try to quickly go to this as well, and hopefully the other workshops may talk about this, but I love the intergenerational piece here. So like I was mentioning before, we're learning from, as youth, we're learning from older folks and what happened in the past, so that we're not either like contributing to it or we're not catering to it, and we're not just like sticking to those set systemic social structures and pathways. But it's also important for older folks who have been tired or who have been going through the movement, but still want to see things happen, to incorporate and listen to youth across all ages to really just figure out like how we can acknowledge what has happened in the past and how we are able to move forward. The ending is I'm trying to still grasp it, but of that question. But I hope that no one is wanting to or thinking that it's I guess the best option to bury their negative feelings associated with systemic oppression and racism. Of course, that is not something that makes us feel good or makes us feel successful about ourselves. Systemic oppression, racism, ableism, constantly having to go through it day to day is not what we want to feel, but we must be able to uplift those voices and give them platforms to be able to speak on their experiences. Like, I could talk honestly for days about the ableism that I've had to encounter as a young, poor woman of color who also has a disability, and that may have been different from other folks who have a disability and may have had privileges of having money or having both parents in the house or whatever it is. I think it's okay that we acknowledge that. Like I said, people don't want to talk about intersectionality or racism or police brutality because they think it's too political, or they think like, oh, it doesn't involve me, or like, oh, it's not disability related. But in fact, it very much is similar to what Dustin was saying. The solutions are definitely interconnected, whether that's between prison abolition or disability justice and accessibility. So I think it's okay to talk about those feelings, and it's okay to acknowledge them and address them, and address the problematic histories that centers may have had and the policies that may have been that came up. But it's just a matter of moving forward, acknowledging and taking responsibility is the first step, and then we move forward with our privilege and with our platforms.
All right, thank you. We're gonna have one quick last question here for Sarah, and then we'll see where we're at then. We've lost a lot of our disability power during COVID. Transitioning out of institution into the communities has been stymied. We've lost many brothers and sisters in congregated settings. How can we, as disability and allied groups, come together to get our power back and to fight the organized abandonment?
First of all, Tom, thank you so much for this question, because it's such an appropriate question right now. And I can't help but think, you know, when we're talking about silos, you know, the disability community is not the only one affected in this. You know, COVID has affected, you know, the aging population, persons in congregate settings, institutions. There are so many stakeholders in this fight, and we have to, you know, come together to share that we are not disposable. We can't be cast aside. We absolutely have to come together and raise our collective voices to let, you know, the state, the federal government know that we need help. We need to get people out of these settings, and we need support and emergency management planning for these kinds of situations in the future. Because I can only imagine, you know, this is not going to be the only pandemic we face. This is not going to be the only situation like this that occurs. We absolutely have to make sure that planning is put in place to address these things now and in the future.
All right, thank you. We are at the end of our time today, so I'd like to thank each of the panelists for so much that was said today. This is definitely going to be one I think I'm going to go back and rewatch again, because there's just so much information and so many truth bombs that were dropped in the last hour. So thank you all so much. And we will be continuing on with the session as we go on today. So don't forget to fill out your evaluation as well. So we look forward to seeing what everybody has to say about this. So thank you all so much.
Thank you.